Am I missing something? Hospitals cannot put liens on homesteads.
Not under the hospital lien statute. It may have happened through the credit. I don't know. I've just met these ladies sitting at the table this evening.
Well, let's be clear that Texas law prohibits hospital liens under the statute for being placed on homesteads, vehicles, or property.
Mr. Chairman, it's specific to attaching only to settlements or judgments. The hospital lien statute is. I don't know how it could possibly get that way on a credit report. I don't know, frankly, so I don't want to address that.
It sounds to me, Mr. Adams, like these three women need some very serious legal counsel about how to clean their credit up and get these. Look, if there are hospitals out there who are filing fraudulent liens, which it sounds like there are, especially in your situation, ma'am, which is under Texas law very clearly frowned upon, and there's very serious actions and consequences for hospitals who are knowingly, intentionally filing fraudulent liens. And if they're attaching those liens to your property, to your vehicle, to your home, then you need help outside of this building. This lien specifically, Mr. Adams, I want to get back to the bill, because this bill specifically is about the hospital lien statute and ER charges.
Correct.
It's taken quite a different route. I've learned things today that I didn't know were happening, and I appreciate you bringing those to my attention. But go ahead.
So I can address my personal experience on some of this stuff, and I have 3 points. I'll try to make them briefly. The first is whether the statute applies to emergency room services. The second is, if not, whether it should. And number 3 is, if this body and the next decide that it should, some ways to ease the pain in situations like we've heard.
Sure.
Thank you for the time that we've spent together personally on this bill. It helped to share some thoughts on this. So this isn't new to you, Mr. Chairman. In my opinion, when the current statute uses the word admitted, that applies to inpatient care in the hospital, whether it be common vernacular or medical dictionary definitions or Medicare guidelines that define admission as a doctor signing an order into inpatient care. In fact, Medicare defines outpatient as ER services. I want to set that aside. I understand your thoughts on this bill and your questions as to why the ER is not covered. So my next point is whether they should be. I want to make incredibly clear, this is not, from my perspective, about keeping money from the hospital that they are owed. I think hospitals should be paid their reasonable and regular rate, whatever that means. But I also want to make sure that we're recognizing the realities of these situations. A lot of these things happen after major car wrecks that cause more than just a hospital bill. They cause orthopedic bills, surgical bills, lost wages. And when we expand a lien, from my perspective, it makes it harder for the plaintiff to take care of other obligations, whether it be other doctors or whether it be trying to pay their rent because they've lost wages. I think there needs to be some sort of fairness injected into the process so that the injured party is not having to turn over the vast majority of a settlement to the hospital. That's not about them not getting paid. It's trying to get everybody taken care of as best as possible.
But if the patient knows about the ER charges, why wouldn't that be part of your settlement demand?
It is. It is. So you have to picture a situation where there's limited funds and the obligations eclipse the amount of the settlement. If all of it or most of it is going to the hospital, there's no money to take care of downstream doctors or to compensate the injured party for the missed work or whatever it is. It creates a super lien that is hard to deal with, and it's hard to address other damages.
Right now, though, how do you deal with a hospital lien? You've got a hospital lien on an injury situation, so the patient was admitted. ER charges are not included. but you're taking into account that hospital lien in your settlement negotiations, correct?
You're taking into account the hospital bill.
The hospital bill.
Yes.
But in many cases, the hospital can file a lien for those charges.
Correct.
So right now, how are you dealing with the situation? Because you deal and dispose of hospital liens now, and I imagine that in many cases, the hospital agrees to take a reduced amount in exchange for a release of the lien.
Sometimes.
Okay.
Sometimes, and sometimes it's harder than it should be. And this example presents one of the problems. I represented an elderly gentleman actually in the Austin area, was in a major wreck. He went to one of the local hospitals who had him there for about 3 hours, 3 CTs at $7,000 a pop. 3 hours later, the bill's nearly $25,000. He's a Medicare patient. They refused to bill his Medicare for the reason that you've heard. They want the bigger bill. And I'm not trying to use a broad brush on every hospital. I don't want to do that. I know there are hospitals that do that. It took me a year and a half to negotiate that because they felt like the lien gave them all the power in the world, and I had a limited policy to deal with when they should have billed Medicare. I have a case right now where a young man was catastrophically injured in a wreck, ended up in a local hospital before he was transferred downtown. He probably spent 2 or 3 hours there, gave them his health insurance through his wife, and they refused to bill it. And now we're a year and a month past, and they continue to refuse to bill it despite multiple attempts. They're using this super lien to justify bigger bills. So some are. That gets me to the solutions. If we're going to, in my opinion, expand, we have to have ways to build in fairness. For example, you made a comment in the layout that the lien protects against those people who don't have health insurance. That's not how it's being used, and it should be made clear in the statute. Like it is with physicians, there are 2 provisions that deal with the doctors, and it says it doesn't apply, basically it says it doesn't apply if there's health insurance. That should be made clear with the hospital too. Force them to file on health insurance. Force them to use Medicare. That's what people pay for. In addition, I would recommend things like if there's not enough money to go around, there should be some sort of fund sharing preset arrangement, as in this legislature did in 2013 on the subrogation bill. It set up a mechanism such that if there wasn't enough money in the settlement to pay the subro and everybody, there was a statutory calculated reduction. It would help ensure that the injured party could take care of other obligations as well. Finally, might sound like a greedy point, but it's not in the end. There should be some sort of statutory reduction for the attorney's work who spends sometimes 2 years going after a hospital bill that ends up getting paid. Sounds greedy. The lawyer doesn't take that fee. It's an equitable reduction that is then passed on, and it helps the injured party become more compensated for what they went through. These things should be built in. There should be fairness built in. If the hospital is giving this super protection over everybody else, there should be fairness. This is why we object and are against the bill as filed.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Adams, and I look forward to continuing our conversations.
Thank you.
I know you've been in communication with the Hospital Association, and in closing, I just want to reiterate to the 3 of you, I look forward to hearing from you. I hope to hear from you and want to talk to you about your situation and understand it better. This committee is committed to fairness, Mr. Adams, but also to justice. And justice is meant to ensure that you're made whole, and we're committed to advancing and safeguarding policies that allow you to do that. And if there's malfeasance, if there's fraud on any part of any physician, attorney, or hospital, then we need to know about it so we can root it out and fix it. I do not believe that making you whole is mutually exclusive to also getting the hospital and our ERs paid $7 billion in uncompensated care in this state. That's unsustainable going forward. And so I think this is a great conversation. I've learned a lot and appreciate you being here. Members, are there any questions?